My name is Elliot Hayes. I'm 34 years old now, and for most of my life I've avoided thinking about certain memories from my childhood and early teens. Not because they're painful in the conventional sense, but because revisiting them brings back a very specific feeling, a cold, crawling discomfort, the kind that settles in your chest and doesn't leave no matter how much logic you try to apply to it. I don't believe everything has an explanation, but I also don't believe fear comes from nothing. This story begins when I was 13 years old, during my first year at a private boarding school on the outskirts of a quiet suburban town I'll call Ravenwood. Ravenwood Academy was surrounded by trees, dense ones, thick woods that pressed in from all sides as if the campus had been carved out of something older rather than built. During the day, it felt peaceful, isolated, sure but safe. At night, though, the shadows stretched too far. The silence lingered too long. I shared a dorm room with a boy named Caleb Moore. At first, there was nothing remarkable about him. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. He wasn't especially friendly either. We were just two kids thrown into the same small space learning how to coexist. Two narrow beds, two desks, one cramped closet we were forced to share. But within the first few weeks, I started noticing things about Caleb that didn't sit right with me. It began with a list. One afternoon, he approached me without warning and handed me a folded piece of paper. His expression was serious, not playful, not embarrassed, just firm. Like he was delivering instructions, not making a request. "These are things you can't bring into the room," he said. I laughed at first. I thought it was some weird joke, some kind of initiation or dry humor that I just didn't get yet. Then I opened the paper. The list didn't make sense. It wasn't alcohol, or weapons, or food things that were already against school rules. It was random, disjointed. Frogs, coins soaked in water, old keys, glass jars without lids. And then there was one item that stood out more than all the others. Salt. I remember staring at that word for a long time. Salt? Just salt? Not food, not seasoning, just salt. I asked him why. He didn't explain. He just repeated that I wasn't allowed to bring it into the room. Ever. There was something in his tone that stopped me from pushing further. Not anger, not fear. Something colder, like the answer wasn't meant to be spoken out loud. That was the first time I felt uneasy around him. The second was when I noticed his nighttime habits. Caleb talked in his sleep. Or at least that's what I told myself at first. But it wasn't the usual mumbling or groaning. He whispered. Long, drawn-out whispers. Sometimes soft, sometimes urgent. Always low enough that I could never quite make out what he was saying. It happened almost every night. I would lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to his voice move through the room like a presence of its own. Occasionally, I'd catch fragments. A word here, a phrase there. It always sounded like he was responding to something, like a conversation I couldn't hear the other half of. I considered telling someone, an RA, a teacher, but after a while it became routine, and routines have a way of dulling fear. Then there was the notebook. Caleb kept it hidden beneath his mattress. I knew that, because I'd seen him slide it there once when he thought I wasn't looking. He never let anyone touch it, never left it out, never talked about it. At first, I assumed it was something personal, a journal, something embarrassing. I told myself it wasn't my business, but curiosity is persistent, especially when you're 13 and trapped in a room with someone who makes your skin crawl. One afternoon, when Caleb was gone, I gave in. I found the notebook easily. Thin, plain, unmarked. Most of the pages were empty, but a handful near the back were filled with names, just names, one per line. Some scratched out, some not. I recognized several immediately. Kids from school, dorm mates, classmates, people I passed in the hall every day. Then I saw my own name. It was there, near the end, not crossed out. My stomach dropped. I didn't understand what the list meant. There were no dates, no notes, no explanations, just names. But something about seeing my own name written in someone else's handwriting, someone who whispered to himself in the dark and forbade salt from the room, made me feel sick. I put the notebook back exactly where I found it. From that day on, I became hyper-aware of Caleb. Every glance felt deliberate. Every silence felt loaded. I started spending less time in our room. I slept at friends' dorms whenever I could. I stayed out late under the pretense of studying. And then one night, everything changed. I woke up suddenly. The room was pitch black. No moonlight, no hallway glow. At first, I thought I was hearing the whispering again. Then my eyes adjusted. Caleb was standing over my bed. He wasn't moving. He wasn't speaking. He was smiling. His hands were raised slightly, as if he'd been reaching for me and stopped halfway through. I screamed. I bolted upright, heart slamming against my ribs. He didn't flinch. He didn't stop smiling. When I demanded to know what he was doing, he calmly told me I'd been talking in my sleep. That was it. No apology, no explanation. He returned to his bed and lay down like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, he claimed he didn't remember any of it, and I didn't know which possibility terrified me more, that he was lying, or that he truly didn't remember standing over my bed in the dark. I thought the nightmare had reached its peak. I was wrong, because a week later, I came back to my room and found a living snake curled on my pillow. And that was only the beginning. I stood frozen in the doorway, my backpack slipping from my shoulder and hitting the floor without a sound that seemed loud enough. There was a snake on my bed. Not plastic, not fake, not something someone bought from a novelty shop to scare a kid. It was alive, small, yes, thin, no longer than my forearm, but unmistakably real. Its body was coiled loosely on my pillow, its head slightly raised, tongue flicking in and out of its mouth like it was tasting the air. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It felt staged, impossible, like a prop left behind after a prank. Then it moved. I screamed. The sound tore out of my chest before I could stop it. I stumbled backward, slamming into the doorframe, eyes never leaving the bed. Caleb was sitting at his desk. He didn't jump. He didn't look startled. He didn't even turn around immediately. When he did, his face was blank, calm, almost bored. "Oh," he said. "Sorry." He stood up slowly, like I wasn't in full-blown panic, like there wasn't a wild animal on my bed. It was just supposed to be a prank, he added. A prank. I demanded to know where he'd gotten it. My voice was shaking so badly I barely recognized it as my own. He frowned at me, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. "They're everywhere." That sentence lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. They're everywhere. We were surrounded by woods, sure. I knew that. But I had never seen a snake on campus. Not once. Not near the dorms. Not on the paths. Not anywhere. Caleb reached for a glass jar sitting on his desk. I hadn't noticed it before. He unscrewed the lid and held it out toward the snake. And the snake slithered into it, on its own. No struggle, no hesitation, like it belonged there. Caleb screwed the lid back on, sealing the snake inside. The way the glass reflected the overhead light made my stomach turn. The snake curled inside the jar calmly like it had done this before. I didn't say another word. I didn't report it. I wish I could tell you I was brave, or smart, or that I trusted the adults around me enough to ask for help. But I was 13, and I was terrified. Terrified of what Caleb might do if I got him in trouble. Terrified of being alone with him afterward. Terrified of being told I was imagining things. So I stayed quiet. The fear didn't fade. It grew. The room itself started to feel wrong, like something had soaked into the walls. Even when Caleb wasn't there, the air felt heavier. The shadows seemed deeper. I stopped sleeping. When I did drift off, my dreams were restless and shallow. I would jolt awake at the smallest sound, convinced I was being watched. Then came the night that broke everything. It started like a nightmare. I was lying in bed, unable to move. My body felt glued to the mattress, every muscle locked in place. I knew I was asleep, or at least I thought I was. Something dark was moving along the ceiling. Not a shape, not exactly, more like a mass, a shifting cloud, thick and pulsing as if it were breathing. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. The thing drifted lower, descending toward my bed. As it moved, something emerged from it. A claw. Long, jagged, wrong. It scraped against the wooden frame of my bed, producing a sound that went straight through me. A slow, deliberate scratching, like it was testing how solid the world was. The claw reached for me, and then suddenly it recoiled, violently, as if it had touched something it wasn't supposed to. The mass exploded into motion, whipping around the room in a frenzy. Books flew off the desk. The closet door burst open. Clothes scattered. In one final violent movement, it hurled itself at the window. The glass shattered. I snapped awake. My neck was already turned toward the window. Glass was still falling. Tiny shards tinkled against the floor, catching the faint glow from outside like stars. The room looked exactly like my dream. The bed frame had deep scratches in it, in the same spot. I couldn't move. The paralysis held me there, forcing me to stare at the destruction. When it finally released me, my first thought was Caleb. It had to be him. I rushed to his bed. He was asleep, snoring softly. I shook him, hard. He didn't wake up. The longer he stayed asleep, the worse the fear became. Because if he hadn't done it, then what had if... I collapsed back onto my bed and cried quietly, shaking so hard my teeth hurt. When Caleb finally woke up, he didn't react with fear. He reacted with anger. He accused me of going through his things. We started screaming at each other. His voice changed. He hissed. Then he started yelling in a language I had never heard before. Harsh, sharp, ancient sounding. I was sure he was about to attack me. Then the RA burst in. We were escorted out. I slept in a vacant room that night. When I woke up, I was freezing. The window was wide open. No one else had been there. The next morning, Caleb was gone. His bed was empty. His desk cleared. His things vanished. The administration told me he was no longer my concern. I never saw him again. But the fear didn't stay behind in that room, because years later, I would realize this wasn't the first time something had watched me while I slept, and it wouldn't be the last. I didn't remember much of my childhood. In clear detail, after leaving Ravenwood Academy, large chunks of time felt sealed off, like my mind had thrown a blanket over certain memories and tucked them away somewhere I wasn't supposed to reach. That was fine by me. I didn't want to open those doors again. But some memories don't stay buried. Some of them resurface when you're least prepared for them. And when they do, they bring others with them. I was 9 years old the first time I remember feeling watched. Every summer, my parents sent me to stay with my grandparents at their farm in rural Northbridge, Pennsylvania. It was a 2-week tradition, the kind families insist on, because it's good for kids. Fresh air, nature, no distractions. The property stretched across 40 acres, most of it dense forest. The house sat at the edge of it, old and weathered, like it had grown there instead of being built. There were 3 floors. The 3rd floor was an attic, mostly unfinished, except for one small bedroom tucked beneath the slanted roof. That room used to belong to my father when he was a boy. That's where I slept. The ceiling pressed down on both sides. The air always felt warmer up there. Still, stale. There was only one window positioned directly across from the foot of the bed, overlooking the backyard and the tree line beyond. My grandparents went to bed early, always before 9. Once they did, the house fell silent. I wasn't supposed to stay up after them, but I did anyway. I'd read by flashlight, play my Game Boy under the covers, anything to fight the boredom. The first summer passed without incident. The second didn't. One night, while I was reading, I heard footsteps on the attic stairs. Soft footsteps. Careful. I assumed it was my grandmother coming to check on me. So I shut off my light and pretended to be asleep. The door handle turned. The door opened a few inches. Then nothing. No footsteps leaving. No door closing. Just silence. I lay there, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I told my grandfather about the noise. He brushed it off. Old house. Settling. Animals in the walls. Raccoons, he said. That explanation didn't sit right with me. Raccoons don't turn door handles. A few nights later, I woke up to my bed shaking. There was someone standing at the foot of it. I couldn't see their face, just a shape, a silhouette against the darkness. I closed my eyes and counted to 100. When I opened them again, the figure was gone. In the morning, my closet door was open. I knew it had been closed. I started wondering if my grandmother was checking on me at night and not remembering it. Elderly people forget things, right? That explanation scared me. But it was better than the alternatives. Things like that kept happening. Footsteps, movement, the feeling of someone being there. I stopped staying up late. I went to bed early. Every night. Years later, my grandparents passed away within weeks of each other while I was in college. At the funeral, I ran into my cousin Lucas. We were close in age, but had never really connected. The only thing we shared was time spent at that farm, so I asked him about it. I told him what I'd experienced. I laughed while I said it, trying to make it sound silly. Childhood fears. Old houses. He didn't laugh. That's nothing he said. That thing used to touch me. The way he said thing made my skin prickle. He told me it would sit on his bed, that he could feel fingers tracing his face, grabbing his wrist, holding it. He said the hands were rough, scratchy, not like our grandparents. I asked him why he never told anyone. He said he did. No one believed him, so he learned to stay still. Hearing that shattered something inside me, because it meant I hadn't been imagining things. And if it wasn't my grandmother, then what was it? I don't know which possibility is worse. Something ancient or something human. I just know that after that conversation, I stopped believing these experiences were isolated. And when I look back now, at Ravenwood at the farm, at the things that watched me through windows, I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it noticed me early, and it never really stopped. The last thing I want to talk about happened when I was 9. It was before Ravenwood, before the farm, before I understood that fear could be quiet. My family lived in a narrow townhouse squeezed between 2 identical buildings. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor. From my window, I could see straight into the 3rd floor room of the house behind ours. The distance between the 2 windows couldn't have been more than 20 feet. For a long time, the room across from mine was empty. Then one afternoon there was a girl standing there. She looked about my age. Dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She wore a yellow sweater. That detail stuck with me. It always has. She waved. I waved back. After that, she was there every day. Always around the same time. Always wearing the same sweater. We played games through the glass, holding up drawings, making faces, guessing shapes. She never opened her window. When I tried to talk to her, she'd smile and point to her ear like she couldn't hear me. I asked my mom about her. She told me an older couple lived there. No kids. Maybe a granddaughter visiting. But the girl never left. Then one night I woke up to tapping. She was at her window. It was past midnight. She wasn't smiling. She pressed her hands to the glass and mouthed words I couldn't hear. "Help me." There was a dark stain on her sweater. I ran to my parents. By the next day, my bed was moved away from the window. Heavy curtains were installed. I wasn't allowed to play the window game anymore. Years later, my mother finally told me why. The previous owners of that house had a daughter. Her name was Hannah. She was 11. She was hit by a car in front of the house just after school. She was wearing a yellow sweater. The Murphy family sealed off that third-floor room shortly after moving in. They said things kept happening. I'm 34 now. I don't live anywhere with windows facing other buildings. That isn't an accident. Reflections still make me uneasy. Glass at night makes my chest tighten. Sometimes I dream about the girl. She's still there, still silent. She doesn't wave anymore. I don't know if all these things are connected. The boy at Ravenwood, the thing at the farm, the girl in the window. But I know this. Every place I lived as a child had one thing in common. Something watched. Something waited. And sometimes late at night when I catch my reflection in a dark window, I get that same old feeling again. Like something on the other side is finally looking back.